In this episode,
But I've seen installs that cost the customers an absolute fortune.
There are some customers that are just never going to like the look of a heat pump in their back garden, and yeah, I don't quite know what you do about them.
So for me, I'm in the middle on that one. I think they're beautiful.
air source heat pumps are loud and noisy and will keep you awake all night.
Just alone in the cast iron radiators was 500 litres of water volume. That's half a tonne.
And they matched the stones that were in the heat pump base with the stones that were already there in the French drain. I was like, oh, come on.
And if you do listen and stand in front of them, they are very quiet. I hear oil boilers that are louder than air source.
The heliotherm is glass lined with brushed steel on it, rounded edge. I mean, it looks an incredible piece of architecture in itself.
Welcome to this episode of Homeowners Q&A, where we'll be debunking some of the most common myths about heat pumps. Whether it's misconceptions about noise levels, installation challenges, heating performance, or running costs, our expert panel is here to separate fact from fiction and provide clear, honest insights. Joining us today are Leah Robson from Your Energy Your Way, Derrick Denton from UK Alternative Energy, and Mark Denman from Custom Renewables. Welcome everyone. To make the session a bit more engaging, we'll present each of our myths to the panel, and they'll respond by declaring whether it's a complete myth, absolutely true, or somewhere in the middle. But before we get started, we'd like to say a huge thank you to today's sponsor, Good Energy. Starting out as a renewable energy supplier 25 years ago, Good Energy has grown to also offer heat pump, solar and battery installations, smart energy tariffs, and electricity charging solutions. Here are just a few reasons to choose Good Energy for your next green upgrade. Good Energy is the only B Corp home energy supplier in the UK, proving their commitment to people and the planet. Rated 5 stars on Trustpilot and Which, you'll get a great customer experience whether they're installing your heat pump or helping you join a new tariff. Quality is also guaranteed because Good Energy only installs premium hardware that's built to last and that's backed by long-term warranties. And there are no third parties, just directly employed, highly qualified and accredited teams that treat your home with respect. Want to find out more? Head over to goodEnergy.co.uk. So let's jump in and clear up some of the biggest misconceptions homeowners encounter when considering heat pumps. Leah, let's start with you. One of the most commonly cited myths we come across is that air source heat pumps are loud and noisy and will keep you awake all night. Is that a complete myth, absolutely true, or somewhere in the middle?
I'd say that's a complete myth. Unless you happen to sleep outside next to your heat pump, then it might keep you awake. But otherwise, you're really not going to hear it. They have got an awful lot quieter in the last few years, and you won't hear your heat pump running. I will guarantee that to you, unless you're sleeping outside next to it.
I think it comes down to design as well. I have seen some installs where they are next to a bedroom window and they shouldn't have been put there. There are some guidance as well about when we're looking at location of heat pumps. Like most things with a good design and a bit of consideration, you are meant to keep away from habitable rooms, so you shouldn't hear them. And if you do listen and stand in front of them, they are very quiet. I hear oil boilers that are louder than air source, so you should be fine.
So it's a complete myth for you, or you kind of somewhere in between, Derrick?
I would say it's somewhere in the between. You shouldn't hear it, but sometimes you will if it's been badly placed.
What about you, Mark?
The same as sort of Leah and Derrick there. I think the newer heat pumps on the market, well designed and well installed according to the manufacturer's instructions. You're not going to hear, Valent, Viessmann's that are out there are quiet as anything. Some of the earlier models are a lot noisier, granted, where there weren't inverter-driven compressors, etc., which is where a lot of the original misconceptions for noise came from. And then your site requirements usually is what causes noise. Like if you have got it bolted onto a wall or you've got it on a flat roof, things like that may cause some reverberations, which could increase the noise, but it's not the noise of the heat pump itself. It's where you've got it. It's a myth in terms of heat pumps, but the way you can sit somewhere in the middle, to sit on the fence, I suppose, is a design requirement. Make sure you install it correctly and you should be fine.
Just also one thing we always encourage our customers to do is go and listen to one, because one person's I don't really notice it is another person's annoying noise, and you don't really know until you've heard one. So if you've got a good installer, they'll have plenty of installs that they'd love you to go and have a listen to it, get them to put it in hot water mode and see how it sounds.
What I do see quite often on the forums is that people will say it's what you said, Mark, there's reverberation. So basically it's a heat pump that's been mounted against the wall, and that's basically creating those kind of low frequency echoes and reverberation through the actual structure of the property, and that's what people find annoying. Is it a matter of, if you are going to wall mount it onto your property, is it best to get anti-vibration mounts put on?
It's like anything. If something's put against something, it's going to make a noise. If you decouple it, you're going to reduce the noise. So if you get a very good wall bracket, I mean, some of the ones we install from sort of Hilti, the Wiesmann wall brackets, and some of the higher end manufacturer ones, they all come with very big rubber feet on them as well. You can get sort of like decoupling strips that you can put against the wall and the heat pump as well with something else. But as long as it's installed correctly, it's designed correctly, it's low flow temperature, it's a modern heat pump, inverter driven compressors, etc., the noise will be minimal. It's where they're badly installed is where you're going to get the noise and that from. The more expensive brands, when you look inside the heat pump, the level of insulation and decoupling that's within them now is insane. Some of the earlier, cheaper models, if you say, when you go inside them, you can see the difference where you've got metal on metal, bits and pieces like that. It's going to create noise and rattling. Go on the Nesta website, go and visit a heat pump like Leah said, get in touch with your installer, see if they've got installs you can go and see. It's well worth doing it.
I tell all my surveyors, do not hang them on walls. It doesn't matter how good the vibration pads are, there is still a heavy weight moving, and it still does sort of echo into the bricks, and then it's like a tuning fork. For us, good practice is always look for an alternative position, and then you eliminate that problem totally.
So Derrick, to you, air source heat pumps are ugly and big.
I'm in the middle on this one. They are big. They do look a little bit ugly. Up until recently, they are a big lump of metal that isn't very aesthetically pleasing, and it's in your garden. Yes, I would say they can look ugly and big. We used to have a lot of twin deck fans, so they were even bigger, and they would encroach onto windowsills and you could see them through the window. Over recent years, I think now we're getting like the anthracite colours, we're getting the black ones like the Samsungs, and they are now generally more single deck fans, but they are a bit deeper and a bit bigger. So they are trying to improve the aesthetics of them, and some of them do have rounded edges now, but hopefully now manufacturers are thinking more about the design, the aesthetics. Over the years, I've seen people get them wrapped, so that was quite cool, where they get a company to come and wrap it, and they wrap it into like the bricks of what it's up against, and then it helps blend it in. So for me, I'm in the middle on that one. I think they're beautiful.
I personally don't think they're ugly myself, but I'm an engineer. That's my look. I love how it looks outside. But I think, someone may think that they can look, quite big in a garden. 100%. It's an object that's in the garden and it's big. It's gonna have a look to it. If you look at some of the units out there, the Valent, the new Samsung, the Wiesmann unit, all look great. You then go to the higher end of the market where you've got Heliotherm and the Chronotherm heat pumps. I mean, they look insane. The Heliotherm is glass lined with brushed steel on it, rounded edge. I mean, it looks an incredible piece of architecture in itself. And also, you can make the pipework look very neat and tidy, and that now with the trunking from an Arbodenko and pump house and whatnot. Primary Pro lagging on the outside makes it look very neat and tidy. I mean, I've seen some of the bases that Leah does. I'll blow some smoke, Leah, there with her, with the wooden and the stones and everything. I've seen ball-nosed edges, concrete bases as well. People are doing lots of things with them now, and you can make them into a piece of artwork in the garden as well. And the heat pump manufacturers are doing a lot more to make them look nicer.
What's your take, Leah?
Thank you, Mark. That was very kind. Do you know what? The guys outdid themselves the other day. There was a house with a French drain, and they matched the stones that were in the heat pump base with the stones that were already there in the French drain. I was like, oh, come on. The other guys on this podcast and my company as well, we take these things incredibly seriously. That's the difference that you get with a really good installer. We are constantly problem solving to try and make the install as pleasing to the customer as possible. Now, some customers have got somewhere you can tuck the heat pump away out the way and nobody gives two hoots about where it looks. On other occasions, the heat pump really does have to be on show, and we all work incredibly hard to make sure that our customers are really happy, and that's what you get when you pay for a decent installer. You get that care and attention, and where can we site the heat pump so that you're happy with it as a customer and you like the look of it, and we've chosen a model that you like the aesthetic of. There are a lot of big black boxes out there, but there are some that are different, and some people love the black box look, other people want something slightly different, like the manufacturers that Mark's just mentioned. We can pretty much always find a way to make it work for you as a customer. So in terms of the myth, I think I am in the middle. There are some customers that are just never going to like the look of a heat pump in their back garden, and I don't quite know what you do about them.
Have you got questions about heat pumps and renewables? Then head over to the forums at Renewable Heating Hub for practical advice from thousands of fellow homeowners and heat pump users. One of the things that we're hearing a lot of is air source heat pumps cannot heat period properties. Myth, truth, or somewhere in between?
That is definitely a myth. I'm going to steal a Nathan Gambling phrase that an air source heat pump can heat a marquee if you want it to. Heat in and heat out is an engineering equation. You can supply the heat with any number of heat pumps if you choose. Having said that, we would be very unlikely to install a heat pump in a property where you've got single glazing and solid walls and poor loft or roof insulation. Just feels to me like in that case you probably should be doing some other stuff first.
I'll jump in for Leah there. I'll finish what she's saying. We just quoted a 1920 home. It's a 300 square metre house. It's a very, very large property. The heat loss of the property was 40 kilowatts. So it was a cascade of up to 3 heat pumps, all going in there to try and get this 3-phase everything. It was all single glazed. The loft insulation was terrible. Solid stone walls. You're not really going to do too much with that. Ground floor was uninsulated. So we've given him a list of items to rectify first before he ends up spending nearly 6 figures installing a whole heating system with ginormous cast iron radiators in it. This is a very unique property, but just alone in the cast iron radiators was 500 litres of water volume. That's half a tonne. It's not just the period properties in terms of can it be installed, it's actually, is it the right thing to install?
For me, yes, it's definitely a myth. We can calculate what a building is losing in heat, and we can design a system to put that heat back in. That side is a myth, but is it financially viable, or is it even practical to do that? So like Mark was saying, some period properties, you don't want to change the cast iron radiators to nice double convector traditional ones. It's just not practical. So there are other questions to be asked when looking in period properties.
Another thing that we constantly hear is air source heat pumps are expensive to run. Myth or truth?
I sit on the fence. A well-designed installed system can be very cheap to run, can be very cost-effective, as long as it's designed correctly, low flow temperatures. I think the current comparative price, unless someone tells you wrong, is 370% or 350% in terms to gas at the moment, where the prices are. We've got heat pumps running at over 400% efficiency. We've got some at the moment on Heat Pump Monitor that are 550%. Comparative to gas, they're very, very cheap to run, and the house is comfortable, warm, hot water all year round, perfect. But I've seen installs that cost the customers an absolute fortune. We've then had to repair and replace to ensure that it's up to standard to save them money. You're somewhere in the middle. It all comes down to the design. A heat pump needs to be designed and installed correctly by the correct people who are then going to maintain it after.
What I tend to say to customers is we'll go into a house where they are running the gas boiler twice a day because they're trying to keep their costs down. So they're running it for a few hours in the morning and a few hours in the evening. And what we tend to find is that we say, if you run a heat pump as it's designed to run all the time, and we'll probably come on in a bit to whether that really is all the time, but let's park that for now. You run the heat pump all the time, so your home is constantly warm and comfortable, and you won't pay the same or less as you're paying for your gas bill. And at that point, you are only warm for a few hours every day. That's the kind of general picture, and yeah, Mark's absolutely right. If you've got a fantastic install, then you will definitely be running cheaper. Just the safest entry-level thing to go in and say to people is you will be constantly warm, and it will not cost you any more money than it currently is to run your boiler twice a day.
Like the other two, I kind of in the middle, so you do get a lot of bad press saying my heat pump in December costs £600 to run, I can't afford this. We all sort of agree on it's most probably a bad install that's causing that. Also, in the winter, the running costs will be higher. You've got to look at this over the year and then make comparisons. And a well-designed system will be cheaper to run than most probably what there was on before on the oil.
I was also going to say that the minute you start introducing solar or even just a battery without solar into the mix and start looking at some of these other energy tariffs, we're seeing specific heat tariffs come on board from particular companies. Even if you're just as simple as doing something like running economy 7 and charging your battery up, even if you haven't got solar panels, charging your battery up overnight and then enabling the heat pump to run for a portion of the day on that electricity that you saved. Yes, we are talking about a decent chunk of change up front, but you really are able to drive your costs right down once you can kind of get the whole package. That really makes a difference.
Do you need help understanding your heat pump? Then pick up a copy of From Zero to Heat Pump Hero, an essential guide offering practical advice and basic instructions for new heat pump owners to maximize system efficiency. Available in print and on Kindle, link in the description. Next, let's talk about domestic hot water. So one of the other big myths is that heat pumps cannot heat your hot water to over 45 degrees centigrade without being efficient. Leah?
That definitely is another myth. Your heat pump can definitely heat your hot water to 50, 55, 60, 70 even, but why would you want it that hot? We're all blending it down to having our shower or bath or washing up anyway. That one's a myth.
It's really interesting because we keep our water at 44 degrees centigrade, but there's still a lot of people that really like heating their hot water to 55. As you said, you've got to blend that down so as not to scald yourself. I still don't fully understand why people have this aversion as to, well, my heat pump can't get my water up to 55.
In this country, we store a lot of hot water unnecessarily. So the actual regulations not regulations, but guidelines, 45 litres per person per occupant plus 45 is way over the top. I mean, if you're doing priority hot water, you can store a lot less water. And then if you did want to then store it slightly hotter, you could store less water again. So you could heat your heat pump to, say, do the hot water to 55 degrees, have a smaller cylinder, because then if you are blending it down, you've got more usable hot water. So where the actual space is a premium, you might have to have a much smaller cylinder, but you could heat it up slightly warmer to give yourself more usable hot water for showering, etc. But if space isn't an issue and you could put, maybe quite a large tank in, maybe a bit higher than what you need, you could store that at a much lower temperature with a larger coil inside it, so it's got more room to actually reject its heat into, which will make the hot water cycles very efficient. I mean, we've seen on open energy monitoring with the cylinder that HeatGeek and Liam from Custom Renewables made that we've got in a few of our properties, the efficiencies that you're getting on them are well over 400%, but you're paying for that efficiency as well in terms of a more expensive, premium cylinder. Again, it comes down to design and the talking with the client about what their needs are, what the occupancy level are. Is it showers? Is it baths? Do you need hot water at a certain temperature because of a medical condition? But as Leah said, you can heat the water to 70 degrees if you want. It's completely up to you.
What do you think, Derrick?
It's another myth for me. I think most manufacturers, when you commission the hot water side, will ask for it to be set to 48. We're already above that 45 degrees. For the building regs, you've got to consider Legionella, where you've got to get the water hotter. So at certain parts of the week, the day, the water is going to be hotter. But also, when I go see customers, an analogy that I use is when the wife is in the shower, we have a bar mixer shower, and she'll set it to maybe 38, and when I get in that, it's too hot, so I have to turn it down to more like 34. Even if the heat pump's set to 48 or 45, it should still be hot enough to have a shower and be too hot that you can sort of stay under it. So for me, that's definitely a myth.
Heat pumps, solar panels, batteries, and more, all planned and installed in a way that works brilliantly for your home. That's good energy. We're heading into the winter. One of the things that people are always saying is that heat pumps are in constant defrost cycles throughout the winter. Myth or truth?
It does depend a lot on not just how cold it is, but how damp it is. So it is going to be different depending on where you are in the country. We're in the southeast. I say it's generally drier. It's not dry today, but generally it's a little bit less humid than other parts of the country. So we probably see that a bit less. Feel like we're all sounding a bit like broken records. But if your system is well designed, then it will be able to run the defrost cycles it needs to run and still keep your house warm. We had one call, and it was a guy who, bless him, he's on Open Energy Monitor. He's been playing with his settings. He's been trying to make his heat pump run as efficiently as possible by himself, and he turned the flow temperature down to 40 or something that it wasn't designed for. And of course, it had managed for most of the year, and then this horrible spell had hit, and it had ended up in a death spiral because every time it tried to heat the house, it then went into defrost. But that was because he'd been messing with the settings. If your installer's done their job right, it shouldn't be an issue.
What about you, Derrick? What do you think?
I would say in the middle on that. If a system's been designed poorly and there's not enough water volume for the heat pump to defrost itself, then yes, you can get more defrost cycles happen. I think it's between 0 and 5 degrees is when there's the most moisture in the air, and because it's sucking the air through the back of the unit so quick, that moisture turns into like a frosting, and then the heat pump will then, it takes the energy from the house to help defrost it. And that could happen, depending on the weather, once an hour or maybe 3-4 times. But also, if there's a bad design and it's struggling to defrost its full cycle, then it will try and do it again, and then you can get, like Leah said, into that death spiral where it's constantly trying to defrost itself and it can't complete the cycle.
What's your take, Mark?
It's the design of the system. If you're designing a system just to the minimum volume that the manufacturers state, then you could have an issue. But if you're designing a well open loop design system with plenty of volume for the heat pump to pull from, then you're going to be perfectly fine. There is other bits you can do that can help. You know, if you get into a bit of a death spiral or the weather has changed, like for example, you can turn the heat pump off from doing hot water. So you run your immersion for your hot water in them spells. So then you're actually lowering the temperature that the heat pump has to produce, because the more output you try and get from the heat pump, what will happen is your suction temperature, which is on the back of the evaporator, is going to go lower, and the lower that goes is where the frost is going to create, because you've got that you're going to have that moisture on the back of the evaporator. It's just going to freeze. So there is things you can do in the colder weathers to reduce defrost as well in bad weather, but as long as you've got a system with plenty of volume that's designed correctly for low temperature, and this is where we're talking about central heating systems designed for, say, 45-degree flow temperatures at -3. If you're designing near 55-60 degrees at -3 with these high temperature heat pumps that they advertise, just because the heat pump can go up to 70 degrees doesn't mean you should be designing it for that, because as you get into the lower temperatures, you're trying to produce too much heat, which is going to cause your heat pump to defrost more. Yeah, it comes down to the design, which is the stock answer for everything. Flow and volume are key for heat pumps. If you've got both of them in abundance, you're never going to have an issue.
You're listening to the Renewable Heating Hub Homeowners Q&A, empowering consumers with the knowledge they need to make smarter heating choices. So this is a new one that I've seen, and this is, I guess, being driven by cost, where we've been seeing comments that all heat pumps and units are exactly the same, irrespective of the brand. Where do you sit on that, Derrick?
I'm in the middle. I suppose if you break it down, a heat pump is a compressor. So in that respect, they are all the same. However, when you come down to the sort of finer details of brand, then they do vary slightly.
What do you think, Leah?
I would say to be guided by your installer. We have sometimes had customers that have been absolutely obsessed that they must have a particular heat pump because they've read something somewhere. And sometimes we've been guilty, in order to kind of try and keep that customer happy and make that sale, of kind of going, oh, okay, well, we'll install that heat pump. And there is just an amount of knowing a particular heat pump, knowing how you can get support, knowing how everything works, knowing how to do the field settings. Be wary, I guess is what I'm saying, of making your installer go out on a limb and getting a specific heat pump, because they're probably the best at doing the heat pumps that they normally do. And I think all of us will probably have kind of a more basic one that we're happy to install, and a more premium depending on what the circumstance. And, we were talking earlier about some of them just being so beautifully engineered that they really are super quiet, or Viessmann with the clever things that makes them defrost less often. And yeah, they probably are a little bit coalescing around big black box. But yeah, see which one your installer is experienced and comfortable and used to supporting, because you don't want to be the customer that they don't have a good relationship with the supplier when you need a part or something goes awry.
What's your take, Mark?
It's exactly the same as the gas boiler market. A majority of them are rebadged from other manufacturers and units. The compressors are mainly the same. A lot of them are from Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. A lot of the wiring and everything else is the same. The evaporators is a coil and some fins. So a lot of the items are very similar in what they do, and the refrigerant cycle is just the refrigerant cycle. So it's an R290 or R32 or R410A or R404, whatever your heat pump's using. So a lot of the main bulk of it is very similar across a lot of the ranges. What changes is the control strategy and the control functionality of each heat pump. If I look at as Leah said, the Vaillant, the Viessmann, the Nibe, Heliotherm, Chronotherm, these very premium brands of heat pumps, the control strategies are completely different to, say, maybe Daikin, Samsung, Hitachi, LG. It's that bit that changes drastically. I feel the more you spend on the heat pump and you go for the premium brands, you do get the better control strategies. The heat pumps work a lot better. We can remotely monitor. And all of these little nuances, as Leah says, is what makes the majority of the similar components work a lot better. For example, on the Heliotherm split heat pump, the evaporator sits on a 45-degree angle, so the moisture doesn't sit on it. It just drips off. So it defrosts less than anything out there. But that is a engineering from Heliotherm that makes it that way. You know, other manufacturers don't do that, but then you pay for that in its premium brand. So some bits are the same, yeah, because it's one manufacturer isn't going to make its own compressor. It's going to use a compressor that a lot of the same heat pumps all use, but it's how it's told to use that compressor is what makes it different. There is brands for a reason. And it's the same in gas boilers. You know, they all do the same thing. They all heat something up, but they all work slightly differently.
We've covered quite a lot of different myths here. And I guess the question is, why are so many of these myths around? You know, why are homeowners coming to installers like yourselves with these questions? Why are these things in the media? Why are there so many myths?
So I think it is a combination of things. It is, in some part, lazy stories from people who don't install heat pumps. I'm not going to name any names, but we have a builder that we've worked with on 3 or 4 projects. Old houses, done heat pumps with him. So I went to a new property that we had, an old property, but a new customer that we hadn't dealt with before. They said, oh, our builder thinks we shouldn't put a heat pump in. He says they're all terrible, that they don't work at all. I was like, oh, right, oh, okay, well, you know, gave them the spiel on why that's not the case. And they said, oh, the builder's coming back in a minute. Anyway, he's just popped out for a bit. And so in comes the builder, and he's the same builder that we've worked with on 4 projects, that he knows full well that heat pumps work perfectly well. But essentially, somebody's asked him, does he fit heat pumps? And he knows he has to engage us and not do it all himself. And there's an extra bit of faff, so he's gone, nah. Heat pumps don't really work that well, because it's an easy answer for him rather than having to go through an extra step in his process and bring in a subcontractor.
What do you think, Derrick?
There's a few reasons for it. The industry has been quite new, so there has been some bad examples in the early days. The media's most probably the worst one. Bad news makes news. So the more horror stories they can get about anything, you know, generally gets more people reading. Happy people don't tend to spread the word, but bad people do. You tend to come across the old school builder who's kind of has been in the game and he doesn't like change and he doesn't understand it, so then he'll diss it. Because a lot of the time, once you've worked with that builder and the customer's really happy, they have to sort of go back on their word and say, yeah, okay, maybe it does work. And I think also they don't know the technology, so people get scared of it as well. They all think it's like this magic boiler. The way it does is slightly different, and it's just educating people that it's not something to be scared of. And we have to embrace it because our country is going that way, and these will be commonplace on all new builds because the building regs have changed.
Where do you sit on it, Mark?
The myths usually come back to who's wherever the money's coming from. I think it happened with the horse and cart industry, didn't it, when vehicles first started. Scaremongering usually comes from wherever the money starts from. So Leah's point with builders, if they don't know how to do a heat pump or haven't got the staff to do a heat pump, it's a margin on their cost they're now not earning because it's going somewhere else. So all of a sudden heat pumps don't work. You know, you talk to a very heavy boiler installer, they're not going to tell their customer that a heat pump works if all they make their money from is installing boilers. And also the other side of it comes from in customers who have had a bad experience. You know, if they've had a poorly installed heat pump, it's costing them a lot of money and all the rest of it. Their immediate reaction is always going to be these things don't work because they've had a bad experience. And social media thrives off bad experiences, doesn't it? It's not all sunshine and rainbows on there, is it?
And that brings us to the end of today's episode of Homeowners Q&A, where we've debunked some of the most common myths surrounding heat pumps. A huge thank you to our expert panel, Leah, Derrick, and Mark, for sharing their insights and helping us separate fact from fiction. Thanks again to Good Energy for sponsoring this episode. From solar panels and batteries to heat pumps and smart renewable energy tariffs, Good Energy takes care of everything you need to make your home a powerhouse. Their blog is also full of information for green tech enthusiasts with expert articles, videos, and case studies explaining how to get the best value from your upgrades. Head over to goodenergy.co.uk to find out more. If you've got more questions about heat pumps or any other renewable heating solutions, please don't hesitate to drop by our forums at Renewable Heating Hub. We're always here to help you, and we'll continue answering the questions that matter most to you, the homeowner. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.